The United States military just failed to defeat the 16th ranked power on earth. And somehow, Washington's response is to claim we are now ready to wage war against number one. Let us dissect this clinical delusion. Let me give you a number that should end the entire debate about this war. 16. Iran is ranked the 16th military power on the planet. Not the first, not the fifth, not even the 10th. 16th. And the most powerful military machine in human history, with a defense budget larger than the next 10 countries combined, could not impose its will on the 16th ranked military power on earth. It could not win the blockade, could not achieve regime change through bombing, could not produce the 96-hour collapse that was promised, and could not stop 81 Iranian tankers from sailing straight through the blockade, a feat the Secretary of Defense called genius under oath. Now, here is the part that should terrify every serious person watching this. Certain voices inside the American defense establishment, having failed against the 16th military power, are now arguing that this proves America is ready to take on the first, China. The argument being made in policy journals and war colleges is that Iran demonstrates American air power can prevail in peer conflict, that the lessons of this campaign greenlight the next one, that losing to number 16 means you are ready for number one. That is not strategic thinking. That is something closer to clinical delusion. And I am going to spend the next 30 minutes explaining exactly what the Iran war actually demonstrated about American military capability, about the global economic order, about China's strategic positioning, and about where this entire trajectory is leading. I am Colonel Douglas McGregor, and this is Global Insight Network. What you are about to hear is the analysis that the people doubling down on failure do not want the public to understand. Stay with me. The American military doctrine applied in this conflict has a specific name and a specific theory of victory. It is called decapitation. Strike the leadership, destroy the command and control, remove the head, and the body stops functioning. It is derived from a theory of warfare that was refined through decades of fighting adversaries who organized their military structures the way most conventional armies organize. Hierarchically, a pyramid with a single apex. Remove the apex, and the pyramid collapses. Iran did not organize like a pyramid. Iran organized like a starfish. A starfish has no central brain. Its neural architecture is distributed across its entire body. You cannot decapitate a starfish. Cut off one arm, and it grows back. Cut the starfish in half, and you get two starfish. The Iranian military command structure, what analysts call a mosaic strategy, consists of 31 independent or semi-independent command units. Each one is capable of operating autonomously. Each one has its own intelligence, its own targeting capability, its own strike systems. When one node is taken out, the others continue functioning. When communication between nodes is disrupted, each node falls back on pre-planned autonomous operations. The decapitation strategy that American air power doctrine was built around assumes a target that becomes less capable as you remove leadership nodes. Against a mosaic architecture, removing nodes does not reduce capability. Each remaining node continues operating on its autonomous mandate. And Iran executed something more immediately devastating than simply surviving the decapitation attempt. Within the first hours and days of the conflict, Iranian strike systems targeted the radar infrastructure that American and Israeli forces depend on for battlefield awareness. The AWACS surveillance aircraft, the platforms that provide the comprehensive real-time picture of air activity that modern coordinated air operations require, were prioritized as early targets. The military analogy is exact. AWACS is the quarterback. A quarterback who cannot see the field cannot call plays. An air campaign that loses its quarterback coordination capacity cannot execute the integrated multi-axis operations that give modern air power its decisive advantage over less technologically sophisticated adversaries. Iran saw the battlefield clearly. America went progressively blind. That is not a tactical setback. It is a demonstration that Iran had studied American war doctrine, identified its critical dependencies, and built a strategy specifically designed to neutralize those dependencies in the opening phase of any conflict. 20 years of preparation, executed with precision. And the people who are now claiming this demonstrates American readiness for war against China, a country that has watched every development in this conflict and is drawing every lesson available from it, are arguing from a level of strategic denial that has no rational foundation. Let me give you the operational numbers on the blockade, because the gap between what is being claimed officially and what is actually happening is so wide that no amount of press conference language can bridge it. 81 Iranian tankers have made it through the blockade as of the most recent reliable reporting, not trickled through, sailed through with no capacity for American naval forces to interdict them. The reason is simple, and the math makes it irrefutable. Iran's coastline and territorial waters, the 12-mile zone that no American naval captain is authorized to enter given the anti-ship missile threat that exists inside that envelope, give Iranian vessels a routing option that keeps them beyond effective interdiction range for significant portions of their transit. The American naval assets capable of actually boarding and stopping vessels strip out the carriers, the submarines, the support ships number, somewhere around 11 in this theater. Against the volume of maritime traffic that Iran has in motion, 11 ships produce interdiction rates in the low single digits on most days. And now the administration wants to make it a worldwide blockade. The legal question alone should stop this conversation. By what authority does the United States seize vessels in international waters from countries with which it is not formally at war, carrying oil that those countries purchased legally? The answer that most of the world's legal establishment gives to that question is the same word, piracy. China has responded to this with something significant that deserves more attention than it has received. China's Ministry of Commerce has activated blocking statutes, laws passed in 2021, specifically designed for this scenario that prohibit Chinese firms and individuals from complying with American extraterritorial sanctions. The legal architecture China is deploying essentially tells American sanctions enforcement, your law does not govern our companies operating in our jurisdiction and in international commerce. This is not a symbolic gesture. It is the systematic construction of a legal and commercial framework that operates outside American jurisdiction, reducing the effective reach of the primary non-military tool that American foreign policy has relied on for decades. Iran has also received satellite intelligence capability that fundamentally changes the dynamic of blockade evasion. When you can see exactly where the interdicting vessels are in near real time, routing around them is not a matter of luck. It is logistics. Iranian vessels can locate the gaps in the blockade coverage and navigate through them with the precision that satellite intelligence provides. The blockade is not failing because of inadequate enforcement effort. It is failing because the geographic reality of Iran's position, the intelligence capability Iran has acquired, and the legal countermeasures that China has deployed make it unenforceable at the scale required to produce the economic pressure it was designed to generate. There is a term in chess for a position where every available move makes your situation worse. You must move, the rules require it, but every legal move you can make deteriorates your position further. The German word is Zugzwang. America is in Zugzwang in this conflict. Option 1, back down, suspend operations, accept that the campaign has not achieved its objectives, and pursue a negotiated settlement. The political cost of this, the acknowledgement that the strategy failed, the relationship consequences with the specific alliance whose pressure drove the decision to fight is assessed as too high by the people who would have to pay it. Option 2, intensify the blockade, expand it globally, seize Iranian vessels in the Strait of Malacca and other international waters. The consequence is a confrontation with China in waters China considers strategically essential, a confrontation that escalates the conflict from a regional war into something with global great power dimensions. Option 3, resume kinetic strikes, hit harder, deploy the hypersonic missiles, strike the targets that previous bombing has not reached. The consequence is Iran activating the capabilities it has been holding in reserve. Gulf state infrastructure, Red Sea closure, undersea cable disruption, and a global economic shock that current conditions are already previewing. All three options make the situation worse than the status quo. And here is what the Zugzwang analysis reveals about the original strategic error. You only reach Zugzwang if the position you built was fundamentally unsound from the beginning. Sound positions have moves that improve your situation. Unsound positions exhaust their viable options and leave only choices that accelerate deterioration. The position America is in militarily, economically, diplomatically is the product of strategic choices that were unsound when they were made. The advisors who said they were unsound before February 28th were correct. The people who overrode those advisors put America in Zugzwang. And in chess, when you are in Zugzwang, the solution is not to move faster or hit harder. The solution is to recognize that the position requires a fundamental reassessment, not optimization of losing moves, but an honest accounting of how the position was reached and what it actually offers. Here is the economic dimension of this conflict that is not being communicated honestly to the American public. The effects are not fully visible yet. They are building like a drug whose full impact arrives hours after ingestion. The supply chain consequences of 60-plus days of Persian Gulf disruption have not yet fully manifested in the prices that American families pay at grocery stores and gas stations. What is already visible should be alarming enough. Gas prices at $6.50 in parts of the United States, jet fuel doubling in cost, with airlines cutting flights, consolidating routes, and some carriers ceasing operations entirely. The closure of a budget airline is not just a business story. It is a signal, the canary in the coal mine, that the broader economic pressure is already breaking financially marginal businesses and will soon reach businesses that were previously considered resilient. The global oil deficit stands at approximately 700 million barrels and is tracking toward 1 trillion. That number is not an abstraction. It represents a real physical shortfall in a commodity whose price affects the cost of almost everything else in a modern economy. Transportation, agriculture, manufacturing, heating, every sector that uses energy, which is every sector, is absorbing this cost. In Korea, gasoline prices have spiked to levels that are visibly straining household budgets. Plastics, whose petrochemical inputs flow through the Persian Gulf supply chain, are becoming scarce in some markets. The industrial supply chain effects are beginning to cascade through economies that thought their distance from the conflict would insulate them. They are not insulated. Global supply chains do not respect geographic distance from the disruption point. A shortage of urea in the Persian Gulf becomes a fertilizer shortage in South Asian agriculture, becomes a food production deficit, becomes food price inflation in countries that import food. The chain is long, but it is direct. The petrochemical inputs, not just oil and gas, but ammonia, urea, and the precursor chemicals for fertilizers that the global agricultural system depends on, are among the most serious supply disruptions for the global South, which depends almost entirely on Gulf source fertilizers to sustain agricultural productivity. The consequence is not economic inconvenience. It is famine. Shortfalls in food production that kill people who have no financial buffer against disrupted supply chains. And this is before Iran has activated its full retaliatory architecture against Gulf state infrastructure. If that activation occurs, if the oil processing facilities and desalination plants become targets, the recovery timeline is measured not in months, but in decades. Iraq's oil production capacity damaged during the Gulf War took 20 years to recover. A simultaneous degradation of multiple Gulf state energy systems would produce a global economic disruption without modern precedent. Iran has put forward a structured negotiating framework, a three-phase approach to de-escalation that is more rational and more detailed than anything the American side has publicly offered. Phase one addresses the immediate security situation, security guarantees for Iran, non-aggression commitments covering Iranian territory, and Lebanon, the preconditions that make any further negotiation possible, establishing that talking does not occur under the threat of resumed bombing. Phase 2 addresses the Strait of Hormuz, the mechanism for commercial access, and the sovereign coordination authority that Iran has established through toll collection and selective passage during this conflict. This is the framework that converts the current de facto Iranian control into a structured international arrangement analogous to the Montreux Convention that gave Turkey control of the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles after the First World War. Phase 3 addresses the nuclear question, the most complex and sensitive elements, enrichment capacity, existing stockpiles, verification mechanisms, the pathway to a durable arrangement that addresses the security concerns on both sides. This is a sequenced, logical approach. It separates the easier elements, the security guarantees, from the harder ones, establishing trust and momentum before reaching the most difficult issues. Iran is also negotiating from demonstrated strength. It has shown that it can withstand a military campaign. It has shown that the blockade cannot be made effective. It has shown that it retains capabilities it has not yet deployed. A country that negotiates from demonstrated strength, that has proven it can absorb the maximum the other side can apply and continue functioning, does not make concessions that the other side could not extract militarily. What Iran has not conceded on the battlefield, it will not concede at the table. The American side, which has promised capitulation and delivered stalemate, is in the opposite position. It is asking for at the table what it could not achieve through military means. The historical precedent for that working is essentially zero. China has not fired a single shot in this conflict. It has not deployed a single soldier. It has not spent a significant amount of its military budget on direct involvement in this theater, and it is the primary strategic beneficiary of everything that has happened since February 28th. So let me walk through why. China activated its blocking statutes, the legal framework that prohibits Chinese firms from complying with American extraterritorial sanctions in direct response to American attempts to pressure Chinese refiners buying Iranian crude. This is tit-for-tat legal architecture. America applies its law extraterritorially to Chinese companies. China applies its law to prohibit compliance. The result is a direct challenge to the foundations of American sanctions power, the assumption that American financial jurisdiction extends globally, and that no country has the legal tools or the political will to contest it. China does, and it is using them. The satellite intelligence that has transformed Iran's battlefield awareness, giving Iran the ability to see American and Israeli military assets with near real-time clarity, came from Chinese technology. The impact of this single contribution cannot be overstated. American military dominance has historically rested on information asymmetry. America could see the battlefield comprehensively. Adversaries operated relatively blind. That asymmetry produced the decisive advantage that made American military operations against less technologically sophisticated adversaries appear to validate the doctrine of air power supremacy. Iran, with Chinese satellite support, eliminated that asymmetry. It saw the battlefield. It targeted the systems that provided American battlefield awareness. It operated with intelligence that matched what American planners had and Iranian planners previously lacked. The lesson being drawn across Asia, in South Korea, in Japan, in the Philippines, across the broader region, is that a security alliance with the United States is now a liability rather than an asset. American military assets have been stripped from East Asia to supply this conflict. Patriot batteries, THAAD systems, Marine expeditionary forces, all repositioned to the Middle East theater. The gap in Pacific deterrence that this repositioning has created is not lost on China. The window during which American military assets are unavailable for Pacific contingencies is exactly the window that American Pacific strategy was supposed to prevent from ever existing. And China is watching Trump prepare to visit Beijing with, as American observers are noting, with increasing frankness, essentially no cards to play. The tariff leverage has been met with counter tariffs and rare earth restrictions. The military pressure has been diverted to a theater where it is being consumed. The alliance relationships that were supposed to provide strategic backing are fraying simultaneously across Europe and Asia. China did not create this situation. China is simply the patient player that recognized it was coming and positioned itself to benefit from it when it arrived. While the Middle East consumes American military resources and political attention, something significant is accelerating in East Asia that is receiving inadequate coverage. Japan is remilitarizing at a pace, and with a public candor politically unthinkable 5 years ago, the defense budget is being doubled. Lethal weapons exports, prohibited for decades by constitutional interpretation, are being authorized. Japanese combat troops participated for the first time in joint military exercises in the Philippines, directly rehearsing interoperability for potential conflict scenarios in the South China Sea. Japanese political leadership has explicitly stated that Taiwan contingencies are Japanese business, that the Japanese security perimeter extends to Taiwan, that Japan will act militarily if Chinese sovereign authority over its own territory triggers conflict. South Korea sits in a structurally unusual position. It has one of the largest standing military forces on the planet, hundreds of thousands of active troops with millions of reservists. Under the current command arrangement, these forces fall under American operational control when specific alert thresholds are reached. The Korean military, as currently structured, is, from an American strategic planning perspective, a massive force multiplier that can be activated for Pacific contingencies through command authority rather than negotiation. The current Korean president, who represents a political orientation that favors recovering Korean sovereign military command, has been told explicitly that no timeline for returning operational control to Korean command authority will be accepted. American military leadership in the region has made clear that the existing command arrangement is not subject to negotiated revision. Meanwhile, the military assets that were supposed to provide the backbone of Pacific deterrence, the Patriot batteries, the THAAD systems, the carrier strike groups are in the Middle East, repositioned to supply a conflict that has consumed them at rates that production cannot replenish quickly. The proxies are being armed, the doctrines are being published, the exercises are being conducted, but the American military capacity that was supposed to back all of this has been redirected to a theater where it is being exhausted against an adversary that was ranked 16th. The strategic incoherence of preparing for war against the first-ranked power while exhausting yourself against the 16th is not subtle. It is visible. And every government in East Asia is drawing its own conclusions about what American strategic guarantees are worth when American strategic management looks like this. The New York Times published an opinion piece stating directly that America is an empire in decline and that the Iran war has overextended it dangerously. The New York Times does not publish opinions that fall outside the range that its institutional position finds acceptable. When it says this, it is signaling that a significant portion of the American establishment has reached this conclusion. The internal indicators that support that conclusion are not ambiguous. 60% of American families do not have $1,000 in savings. 40% cannot cover a $400 emergency expense. Life expectancy is declining, an indicator that does not occur in healthy developed economies. The infrastructure of daily American life, airlines, supply chains, the agricultural system is showing the stress fractures that precede more serious structural failures. These are not cyclical problems. They are the accumulation of structural contradictions that have been building for decades, and that this conflict is accelerating. The war on Iran was supposed to be the demonstration of continued American dominance, the proof that the unipolar moment was not over, that American military power could impose its will on adversaries who challenged the order it had built. Instead, it has demonstrated the opposite. It has shown that American air power doctrine, built on decapitation, on information asymmetry, on the ability to see and strike without being seen or struck, has been countered. That an adversary with sufficient preparation, sufficient geographic advantage, and sufficient access to technology that eliminates information asymmetry can absorb the maximum American conventional military pressure and continue functioning. It has shown that the economic warfare toolkit, sanctions, blockades, financial exclusion, has limits that Russia and China have spent years building the architecture to reach. China's blocking statutes, Russia's alternative payment systems, Iran's overland supply chain alternatives, these are not improvised responses. They are the products of deliberate preparation by countries that saw this confrontation coming and built their countermeasures in advance. And it has shown that the global south, the countries that American strategic planners assumed would remain within the American economic orbit, regardless of what America did militarily, is accelerating its pivot toward alternative arrangements, not because they love China or Russia, but because the American alternative has revealed itself in this conflict as offering primarily the choice between submission and destruction. That is not a sustainable foundation for global leadership. The empire is not collapsing in a single dramatic moment. It is eroding at the specific points where its actual capabilities fail to match its stated claims. Each failure of the claim, each blockade that cannot be enforced, each campaign that cannot achieve its objectives, each alliance that does not hold, removes another stone from the foundation. The people who are drawing the lesson that this demonstrates readiness for war against China are not engaging with reality. They are doing battle with reality, insisting that outcomes mean the opposite of what they demonstrate, that failure proves capability, that losing to the 16th power signals readiness for the first. That way of engaging with evidence does not produce good strategic decisions. It produces progressively larger versions of the same mistake at progressively higher cost. America could not win against a 16th ranked military power on earth. It could not make the blockade work, it could not achieve decapitation, and it could not produce the economic collapse through sanctions that its strategy required. It could not prevent China from providing the satellite intelligence that eliminated the information asymmetry that American doctrine depended on. Iran has a three-phase negotiating framework on the table. It is rational, sequenced, and reflects the position of a party that negotiates from demonstrated strength. The zugzwang is real. Every available American move makes the position worse. The path out requires acknowledging that the position is unsound, that it was unsound when the decisions that produced it were made, and that the exit requires accepting terms that the people who started this war told the American president he would never have to accept. China is patient. It is winning without fighting. It is building the legal, commercial, technological, and strategic architecture that will define the next era of global order, and this conflict is accelerating every component of that construction. The lesson the American establishment should be drawing from this conflict is the one it is most resistant to drawing. Not that air power doctrine needs refinement, not that the blockade needs more ships, not that the hypersonic missiles will change what the previous strikes could not change. The lesson is that reality does not yield to political will, that strategic assessment must be grounded in honest capability analysis rather than institutional pride, and that the path from zugzwang to a viable position requires moves that look like retreat, but are actually the only moves that lead somewhere other than deeper into the trap. This has been Global Insight Network with Colonel Douglas McGregor. If this analysis said something that the institutional narrative cannot afford to say, share it, hit like, and subscribe to Global Insight Network for the strategic assessment that meets reality rather than fighting it. Drop your analysis in the comments. Is there a version of this that does not end in the way the trajectory suggests? What would genuine strategic course correction look like?